Greetings, fencers. So we're going to talk today about the different Regenyei blades, or their flexes. So they have a strong, medium, and a light. I don't have a light here, but I have gotten to use it a little bit. But I'll mainly be talking about the strong and medium. Now, this has become a bit of an importance because recently a couple tournaments have banned the Regenyei Strongs. You may have noticed on the biggest retailer for North America is Purple Heart Armory. The Strong used to be what they called the tournament feather, or the standard feather. And now it's the medium is their tournament or standard feather. And the reason for that is, some tournaments like SoCal have banned the Strong because it's too stiff. The standard one has switched to the medium flex. And so this Regenyei Strong is actually what I've used the most. This is my first sword that I ever got. And it is quite a hefty feeling blade. Now, the overall weight of Regenyeis are always quite light. They're a lot lighter than Siggi's and Cavetans. But the Regenyei Strong has a point of balance a little bit past the shield. So it's got a little bit larger point of balance, so the blade tip moves just a touch slower and has a little bit more impact when you hit another person's sword. With that same philosophy, it also has a harder impact on a person anytime you land a cut. So it does hit harder. Earlier on when I was fencing, when I went to a Cavatan that was a little bit lighter point of balance, I always wanted to go back to my Regenyei Strong because I missed being able to break through different people's cuts. Eventually it switched where I did like the Cavatan better, but that is a part where this does control other people's swords more and definitely has more impact. Again, with being an overall light sword, it's not a heavy sword. I think it's like 1480 grams, something like that. And so for the flex, if I just try and do the flex here, I can't bend it that much without really using my muscle, and then if I let go, it's fighting me the whole time. Now, when you do get a big flex with the Regenyei, it flexes fine. It will look like a noodle in slow motion footage. Here I can put a couple clips of me getting thrusts with the Regenyei, where the Regenyei Strong, where it gets huge flexes, and no one is mad about the impact of the thrust. But when I'm actually fencing, especially now, if I use the Regenyei Strong, I'm really being conscious of not thrusting if I think someone is running into the sword or jumping into the sword. This is an example of me with a light sword getting a thrust, and you can see how the sword stays bent. I wouldn't take that opening with a Regenyei Strong because it's gonna hurt. And a serious injury is possible to happen. You could hit someone right in the neck or right in the head and give huge whiplash, or break a rib, something like that. Stuff like that can happen if someone is running into you. Now, if you're just thrusting and you hit and the person steps backwards and you have time to get that big flex, it's safe for that, but you do have to be more conscious of not actually letting someone run into the sword. Now, if we go to the Regenyei Medium, if these didn't have different shilts, I would essentially not be able to tell them apart until I grabbed them and bent their blades. They feel almost identical. There is barely any difference between their feeling. Okay, they have the same point of balance on the blade, so they both have a little bit more blade impact than some of the other swords around, like Cavatan and Siggi's, that have a tighter point of balance. And so the only real feeling of difference is the medium has just a little bit less pull. It doesn't want to sink down like the heavy does. The medium takes a little bit less effort to keep this tip sitting up, and if I start swinging it, the medium is going to get there a little bit quicker. It's not much, but it's a little bit. And so really the only physical difference that I can see is that the medium has just a little bit less steel eventually at some point in this last section. And so it's not much, it's just a little bit, like maybe a millimeter with both sides included. It's still in the 1400 grams mark, and so it's a very small difference. When it comes to flex, This is easy to hold, I can bend it down easier, and now I'm having to strain, and you can see when it bends back, it just comes back to straight, unlike the strong, which just has so much spring ready to go back the other direction. And so this sword, a lot of people can actually flex. People with Regenyei strongs, I have smaller students who, when they try and thrust with a Regenyei strong, they just can't bend it. They can place it, they're not going to get any flex. With the Regenyei medium, they can actually start getting flex. The Regenyei medium can wobble a little bit on the ground, whereas the Regenyei strong essentially doesn't wobble. And so comparatively, in between the Regenyei strong and the Regenyei medium, the Kveiten FFG has its flex. So the Kveiten FFG is in between these two. And then the light has the biggest difference. The light feels like you can just swing it around one-handed. It has a very effortless flex to it. It bends very, very easily and feels far more like a different sword. Whereas the medium is definitely this balance of you get the benefits of that Regenyei strong blade, of that little bit more blade impact, while still having a safer flex than even some of the other swords around on the market. Although both are nice swords, the Regenyei strong, what I found is I don't grab it for sparring very often. If I'm wanting to practice competitive sparring, I'm going to grab a medium, because that's going to let me go for my thrust with a lot less thought of the other person's safety. A Regenyei strong is still good. You can still practice, you can still do everything with it. You just have to be more conscious about what the other person's doing. You can't just fence as competitively. And for stuff like armored fighting, if you want one with flex, but that is still pretty stiff, something like this is good for it. Thanks for watching. Keep studying. Keep practicing.